Hi, everybody. This is my model for you to help you think about how you might go about constructing your unit plan for stages 1 and 2 of the Understanding by Design method. I was a former English teacher, so I'm using some of a unit that I used to teach to my sophomores. I have as you can imagine, quite a collection of these units. But this one was one of my favorites, or was one of my favorites to teach. And it was relatively fleshed out using the UbD model. So it's the one I chose to share with you, just to help you think about how this works. And so the unit of study that I'm showing you is an inquiry unit that's framed by a broad inquiry question. And this question is, what is a hero? It's designed for 10th grade. If I were framing it as thematic, I might frame it as the hero quest or the quest story. If I were framing it as a topic, I might frame it as story structures in Hero Quest. But I like the inquiry question because the inquiry question helps tie it into the essential questions of the unit. And so the text set that I'm going to use music, film, a classic text, and a young adult novel. Okay, and I'm going to encourage you this week too to think about what your text set will be. And text is used broadly in terms of what you're going to be using. So it's not just for English teachers. If you're a math teacher, science teacher, art teacher, social studies teacher, what's your text set? What are you going to rely on for helping students to get to the goals and the learning outcomes of your course? I would not recommend that the textbook is the primary text set. It could be one piece in the text set, but I would recommend that you supplement that with articles, experiments, manipulatives, problems, but think about what your text set will be and how it will fit in with your design, okay? And you may not know yet what all that is, okay? So it's not necessary for you to have that yet. You can put to be decided there, if you're unsure. But I've taught this unit a million times, so I knew what I was going to have here. And so now I look at the established goals, and this is backward design. The logic of backward design is to what is it I want my students to be able to know and do. And I'm entering this from the viewpoint of standards. You could enter it from another viewpoint. Remember in the handout, the handbook for UbD, there are various ways of entering this. You could enter with performance standards, or what you want students to be able to learn or do. You could enter it topically. I'm going to enter it with standards. And so I know that in this particular unit, my students are going to read and write. Okay, that's my skills that I want them to do. I want them to be able to read well. I want them to be able to write about what they read, and I want them to be able to have a command of conventions. And so I've chosen 4 reading standards, and 2 writing standards, and a language standard. I'll show you how these play out in a moment. And then I'm looking at the enduring understandings. These are effective goals. These are the big ideas. These are specific understandings that aren't contained in the standards. Okay, so my enduring understandings are these. People tell stories to clarify their beliefs for themselves and others. Stories follow a recognizable pattern. When we compare the familiar to the unfamiliar, we understand both better. Who a person or culture designates as hero tells much about the person or culture. Myths are mirrors of values, religion, family, community, science, and or reasoning. Heroes often rise from danger or uncertainty. These are very important concepts that I want my students to take away from this unit. I don't want them just to be able to read and write. I want them to leave this unit with an understanding of myths, how they happen, what literary heroes are and why they arose and why we continue to celebrate them and why they continue to populate our pop culture and our films and our books. I want people to understand storytelling. These are not things that are contained in academic standards, folks. And so these are important for me in an ELA classroom for our students to take away. But I also want them to investigate broader questions, and not only the inquiry question of who is a hero. Remember going back, what is a hero? But I also want them to know who can be a hero. Can anybody be a hero? Where do heroes come from? And who decides who's a hero? Does the hero, him or herself, decide that he or she is a hero, or does somebody else do that? And who is that constituency that makes that person a hero? Is that posthumously? Is it, when the person's still alive? Who does that? That's a big question I want them to investigate. And I also want them to understand or investigate, how does history and culture influence who is considered a hero? And you'll notice that there's some similarity here with some of my understandings and my questions, and that's purposeful. As they're investigating how does history and culture influence who is considered a hero, we look over here and we see that heroes often rise from danger or uncertainty, and that myths are mirrors of a society. And we here, when it says how does history, who decides, over here we look and see who a person or culture designates tells much about of the culture. So there's a lot of interplay here between the essential questions and enduring understandings. And that's purposeful on my part, because as they invest, I want them to get these understandings through inquiry, through investigating these broader questions. And then my learning outcomes are in two pieces, as I noted on the blank template. First of all, what do I want my students to be able to say? What is the key knowledge and skills that students will acquire as a result of this unit? This is declarative knowledge, okay? But also, what will they be able to do? Okay, what will they eventually be able to do as a result of this knowledge and skill? This is procedural. I'm going to take you back to the standards for a minute, okay? And if we look here, we can look to see, what these standards demand of a student. Analyze, determine, write, develop, strengthen, demonstrate. Look at the verbs in your standards to help you flesh out what you want your students to be able to do and know in order to be able to meet these standards. So what I've come up with are these. For the declarative, I want my students to be able to link the elements of the hero's journey to popular culture and modern stories. I want them to see that, that these are not separate, that this has gone through stories through time, that we can trace the hero's journey straight through to today. And we go back up and look at the standard 9.10.9, and it says, analyze how an author draws on and transforms source material in a specific work. And they give an example of Shakespeare drawing on Ovid or the Bible. I'm going to argue here, I'm going to look at this and interpret that our modern authors draw on and transform source material from ancient texts. In this case, Gilgamesh is the first story, is a prototype for the hero quest, and it has appeared and reappeared in stories across cultures and across genres up to present day. Okay, and we could look at the Hunger Games and see the hero's quest in the Hunger Games. We can look at Star Wars, see the hero's quest in Star Wars, and any other number of stories. And once students start to see this in stories, they start to see it everywhere. And this is true transfer of a standard. So being able to understand and analyze how an author draws on and transforms source material translates into a learning outcome of being able to link the elements. I also want them to be able to articulate the elements of the hero's journey. Okay, so not just link it, but know what they are. And that goes back to 10.2, which is determine a theme or central idea of a text and analyze in detail its development over the course of a text, how it emerges and is shaped. This is the hero's journey. How does the hero is the central idea or theme, being able to analyze that development over the course of a text, okay, of that character, of that idea as it goes through the hero's journey, that character goes through the hero's journey, and what happens with that central idea. And then I also want them to be able to articulate the archetypes, and this is the same standard. So it's not only looking at the elements, but the archetypes associated with the journey. I want them to compare story elements between two or more texts. Okay, I'm going to take you back up to 7. Analyze the representation of a subject or a key scene in two different artistic mediums. okay, including what is emphasized or absent in each. They give the example of two um, poems. I take this, I interpret this a little bit different. In two artistic mediums, I look at, I'm sorry, it's a poem and a painting. I apologize. I read it very quickly. So they are two different artistic mediums. And so what I want students to do is to be able to look at two or more texts, and text is used broadly, and I'll show you in a second what those two texts are. When we look at the procedural knowledge, this is what they can do, and I want them to write. This is the skill that they're going to take away from this. Okay, I want them to write informative or explanatory essays. I'm going to take you back up to 10.2. Write informative explanatory essays, text to examine and convey complex ideas, concepts, and information clearly and accurately through the effective selection, organization, and analysis of content. Okay, so that's a lot of stuff going on in there, okay, but this is what students do when they write these kinds of essays. I want them to be able to revise their written work. Okay, I'm going to take you back up to 5. Develop and strengthen writing as needed by planning, revising, editing, rewriting, and trying new ways. I also want them to have command of English conventions. Sorry, I lost my place there for a second. So I'll take you back up to here. Demonstrate command of the conventions. I also want them to be able to apply appropriate comprehension strategies. A lot of students have difficulty with understanding text, and so that takes me back up to 10.2 and 10.3 of being able to determine the theme and understand the complex characters. Okay, those are comprehension strategies. And then, so that's stage 1, folks. Okay, for my particular unit, I've come up with my enduring understandings, my essential questions, my learning outcomes, my standards, and my procedural and declarative. And now, how am I going to know that what they did? How am I going to assess that? So this is that backward planning, where I want them to be able to do these things. How am I going to know that they did it? This is what I've decided on. I want them to be able to write an essay that explains and traces the hero's journey in modern stories or pop culture, points out archetypes, and compares the journey and archetypes to those in Gilgamesh, encompassing 3 standards. And if you go back up and line that up with these learning outcomes, okay, I'm now assessing those here. Okay, you can see that I'm assessing these 3 standards: writing and learning. I want them to create a quest map. I'm sorry, not learning, but literacy. I want them to create a quest map for a text that outlines the journey and identifies the elements and archetypes. So here's where I'm looking at the comprehension and the reading strategies, that they're able to articulate those pieces of the journey. And then what other evidence will I use? I'll have them keep reading journals. We'll do fishbowl discussions. We'll do literature circles. We'll do free writes. We're going to do a small group construction of a quest map of the Wizard of Oz. This is helping them to get some expertise in understanding the hero's journey, so they can now apply it to another text over here as a summative assessment. So this is a formative assessment. This is the summative assessment. These are formative assessments to help me understand where students are in the learning process so that they can write this essay and they can complete this quest map. It's also helping me to know who I'm going to have to differentiate for, if I'm going to give extra help, and so forth. And these may change as I continue to plan my unit. I may decide that these aren't going to work. I may alter these. I'm not quite sure yet until I get to the build the learning plan, which we're not going to do this week. We're going to work on that the next module. So that's it, folks. I'm going to give you this document for you to look at and to have to investigate. And just because it's English doesn't mean that the rest of you can't use it as a model for determining what your criteria is going to be for your unit plan. So with that, I'm going to let you investigate this on your own, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you have as we move along. And I'm going to give you feedback on this when you submit it in 2 weeks. Have a great evening.